Hello everyone, this is Rexer of the YouTube and Twitch channel NotQuiteThereGaming, bringing you, as we've previously discussed in my addendum to my Ash guide, a redo of a guide I've done previously in order to get more time to do a brand new guide for Mesa, which will be hopefully coming next week. In the meantime though, we're going to be taking a look at one of my more popular guides. We're going to be discussing Vauban with his fancy new beret, which the beret is no longer affecting his skills in a terrible way, which I am very happy about. I always wanted to wear this helmet, but the bonuses on the old arcane helmet of this design weren't really to my liking. He is everyone's favorite crowd control Warframe. If you've watched my previous guide, most of what I said is still valid, except for the fact that, well, we've had the ability changes that now mean that Warframes no longer have to slot ability mods, and we've had range changes to Vortex. So now ranged mods affect Vortex. The wiki states, however, that range mods only affect Vortex in a proportion of 50%. Requires further testing. I can't really speak to that, but it did seem when I used both stretch and overextended that it wasn't as effective as I would have hoped. So let's take a look at my, I would say, recommended build for Wauban. I really love the immortal skin on him, by the way. So, the quick, rough and hard of Vauban. Energy siphon. Yes, you want it. Continuity, constitution and narrow-minded. You want all of these. Streamline and fleeting expertise for 75% power efficiency. Perfect power efficiency. For those of you who still haven't figured it out yet, and I don't mean that negatively, some people just haven't figured out that mods stack with each other additively. So minus 50% power duration, plus 30% power duration, plus 28% power duration, and plus 99% power duration all stack with each other additively. So after you add these together, subtract this, the result will be what is multiplied with the base duration of Bastille, of Vortex, the number of uses for Tesla, I do believe, yes. So that these skills, these mods, are super important to get the most out of Bastille and out of Vortex, because I did a ton of calculations in my previous guide, which I will spare you of this time. This combination, having all of them at once, will mean that you get the most possible bang for your buck out of your crowd control skills, which is primarily what you want Vauban for. In order to compensate the downside of narrow-minded, we will take stretch, who itself has no downside. On the subject of taking power strength mods, you might want to consider, for example, taking transient fortitude, which is my new absolute favorite secondary to intensify power strength enhancing mod. It reduces power duration, but it doesn't affect Vauban that much. It doesn't affect you that much when you have a lot of power duration already stacked because of the way the calculations work. Relative to the entire duration boosted, the downside is minimal. but I do not actually recommend taking any excuse me, any power strength mods that have a downside, or any. I don't recommend taking transient fortitude, blind rage, or overextended on Vauban, because if you just multiply cast Bastille or Vortex, you get the same effect, and you don't need to sacrifice duration, which will sacrifice your efficiency, or sacrifice your efficiency itself with blind rage. With overextended, you will sacrifice the number of targets that can be held up by Bastille, and the improvement to range is not that good for Vortex because of the aforementioned theorized, not 100% proven, 50% effectiveness of all range mods on Vortex. So, I said this was going to be rough, hard, and quick. I kind of lied, okay, sorry about that. But the idea is, whatever you slot in Vauban, you need Energy Siphon, Continuity, Constitution, Narrow-Minded, Streamline, Fleeting Expertise, both one short of maximum for 75% power efficiency exactly, and Stretch. This is all you need for Vauban. The last two mods can be whatever the hell you want. I chose to take Redirection for extra shield capacity because shields regenerate, and I've come to learn that even though you can get more effective HP in certain builds by slotting, for example, Vitality, it's more important to have something that can regenerate quickly than in some cases to have more effective HP. Effective HP helps you survive against single big hits, but if you don't have a way to regenerate it fast enough to get to maximum effective HP again, then you didn't really do much. Redirection regenerates, and Vauban shouldn't be in the front line anyway. You can choose Vitality, Redirection, anything you want, really. But I chose Redirection because it regenerates. I also chose Flow because the primary use for my Vauban these days is Orokin Derelict Defense. Everyone loves Orokin Derelict Defense. Now a little less so than when we didn't have the new infested enemies in Orokin Derelict Defense. Awkward, but the new enemies have added a few interesting challenges to Orokin Derelict Defense, whereas before it was just a 40 or 50 minute stomp of enemies for just XP farming. Flow helps a little bit with withstanding those energy drain auras. Having a lot more power to draw from will mean that there will be more time in which you can react to energy drain auras. Also, not having your energy maxed all the time means that you can still benefit from your energy siphon almost all the time, and from the energy siphons of your team, hopefully. Though some people choose to take some really weird auras to infested Orokin Derelict Defense these days. I really don't know. Like Steel Charge, Rifle Scavenger? Okay, I guess maybe you're leveling your Warframe or something. You have a gimmick, I don't know. Anyway, so important part: Energy Siphon, Continuity, Constitution, Narrow-Minded, Streamline, Fleeting Expertise, and Stretch. I recommend Flow for Orokin Derelict Defense. I recommend Redirection for the same deal. You can slot anything you want in these two mod slots, however. If you don't want Flow, you can take, for example, a enemy radar, enemy sense as it were, for the mod equivalent of the aura, which I also recommend taking if you want to do roaming missions, but there are other Warframes that are much better suited to roaming missions than Vauban himself. I will post the Forma optimized guide in the description below for any combination of optional mods in here that I will choose to show you guys. As you can see, my formatting is a little bit of a mess for Vauban right now. Anyway, this is pretty much the entire mod section. Going forward, I will be talking about Vauban's abilities individually. There isn't that much to talk about this time, but thanks for watching so far. If you are a newer player perhaps, please do keep watching and supplement my guides always with a healthy dose of reading the wiki, because I don't like to repeat things that are already mentioned on the wiki unless I really want to underline them. So abilities, we have Tesla first. 150 damage, 10 charges, power range 12 meters. Hidden duration of 40 seconds. I do believe that is not affected by power duration, but the number of charges is affected by power duration. Weird, but okay. It was nerfed, I would say, with a lot of limitations, like the number of charges didn't exist when Vauban was introduced. Pretty much every one of Vauban's skills have been nerfed since they have been introduced, except bounce. Bounce gained some damage and stuff, so that was okay. I have to say, overall, Vauban isn't as fun to play as when he was overpowered, because balancing him kind of eliminated some really gimmicky, fun builds that you could have done with him, like Vortex only build with power efficiency, power duration, and whatever else you wanted, because range didn't affect it and you didn't really care about power strength for it either. Or yeah, that would have been really fun. I would really like that idea. Tesla, I don't really like the fact that it has a number of charges now and that you can't influence the total duration of it. Anyway, back to Tesla. It does decent damage. I never really saw any particularly strong use of it. The wiki recommends using it against infested, actually. I don't know about that. The damage values for individual shots kind of falls off too fast. Tesla, I will say though, is very, 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 very useful when you're leveling Vauban. If you get into an mobile defense mission, or even in an interception, I think it should work. It should work in an interception mission. If you do a line, or just completely spam Tesla all over the place, as long as you don't throw them all in the exact same spot, you will get shitloads, literal tons of EXP from that. One for casting and a second for the kills that you will get from Tesla. So it's really great for that. There is the modifier mod that creates a link between your Tesla with a slash damage component to it. I have not had the opportunity to try that yet, sadly. I don't really expect that it would be too influential though. Still, in what I've showed you previously, you can basically slot that into one or the other of the two optional mod slots in this build. But there is a Bastille modifier mod in the works, and that might be interesting to slot in one of those open slots when that comes out. I can't tell you exactly what they decided on in the design council, because I'm secretly hoping that they won't go with the majority decision, which is kinda dumb. But we'll see. Secondly, we have bounce. But okay, so conclusion: Tesla, really good for leveling, not very good for anything else. If you can nail your sentinel or nail a friend with a lot of Tesla in a roaming mission, that's really fun too. But you need to have a volunteer for that, and nailing your sentinel takes quite a lot of practice to do, and your teammates might get upset with you if you keep stopping every 40 or so seconds to nail a bunch of Tesla on your sentinel. And you're not going to catch up with them to make use of it, so if you're soloing or if you have volunteers, it's great. Otherwise, not really. Bounce. have a funny story about bounce. I never used to slot bounce, and I'm going to own up to some really stupid derpy moment I had like just the other night. So I was trying out Vauban's abilities, I was trying out builds, see what works best or what doesn't work, and I got into an Orokin direct defense, and lo and behold, people were taking my favorite perch spot. So you know how there are 4 corners in Orokin direct defense, and now with the new enemies especially, you can't really perch on the poles, let's call them, in the middle of the walk paths, because those are very exposed positions. I don't recommend that. So someone was taking my favorite perch, so I got a little bit upset. Not at first. I asked that person, hey, please, could you move? I really need to have this perch as Wauban. It's very important for me because I'm kind of the linchpin of the team right now with the CC. And if you're sitting here, we're going to get both shot, and you don't even seem to be rolling when you get hit by the infectious fly cloud from the infested. And I might shoot you with the angstrom and kill myself, and that's not gonna be fun. And I might throw a vortex into you, and then we're going to wind up with a lot of enemies vortexing to us, and that's not gonna be fun. But the person didn't react at all, so I had to look for another perch. Since they removed the endless wall run bug, it's a little bit harder to get into high positions. Yes, you can probably already spot what my derpy moment was. So there's one other perch I can get to relatively easily, but not as easily as the first one. So I go there, and well, someone else is taking it now. So there are 3 corners in there. There are 4 corners, one of which I don't really know how to get to with usual wall running. So at least not with a Warframe of Vauban speed. So every other teammate in my team has taken one of the 3 perches which I can get to. So I get a little bit upset. I tell them, hey, I'm going to need a freaking perch. I can't be Vauban and run around on the ground. Nothing. No reaction at all. And I know they're talking about other things in the meantime. No reaction at all whatsoever from them. What's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is I really got very upset with them, and I ended up quitting on 10. I warned them 3 waves ahead that I'm going to quit on 10, on wave 10, unless they are going to let me have one of the decent perches. But they didn't. Nothing. Asked them, hey, do you realize that it's a liability to have Vauban walk around on the ground and not have a perch to sit on? No. That was the most amount of response I got out of them, out of everything I typed. So I quit on 10. They were surprised for some reason. I don't know. I warned them ahead of time, like 3 or 4 minutes earlier, whatever. The moral of the story is, and I'm going to own up to it completely, that I forgot to use bounce, because I never used to slot bounce before the ability changes, and I forgot I had it. So I suppose the majority of the blame for that was mine, because there was a 4th corner that I could have taken, even though I didn't know how to wall run up it, by using bounce. Derp. I'm not going to be one of those guys that sits here and tells you that I'm 100% absolutely fucking perfect, because I'm not. Perfection doesn't actually exist. So yeah, I'm going to tell you though that there are some things I know about and that I would like to share with you. So one of them, bounce, people. Bounce is a thing again. You can use it to get into one of those perches on orc in direct defense, and you can use it to help your teammates get into one of those perches without having to wall run and sometimes miss. Another thing I want to say about the orc in direct defense corners, the perches, which I keep calling them perches. With the new enemies, don't stand exactly on the corner. If you have line of sight to the entire map, you are going to be able to get shot by the infested MOAs from the entire map, relatively speaking. So, stand a little bit against the wall next to the actual corner, if you get my drift. So, my favorite perch now is the one where you have a tree root growing right next to it, so it's blocked to the right, and if you stand a little bit into it, no one can see you from behind either. So it's like only two directions you can be seen from, and the other two are covered. So that's really great for Vauban. Otherwise, I have a personal request. Please, when you're playing Warframe, communicate with each other. I had a really great game. After that little derpy moment, we had a speed nova that was actually slowing people, and the host was whispering me, hey, we should quit, this guy is awful, he's no good for anything, and we need to get a new nova, this guy lied to me, he was getting upset. And instead of that, we explained to the offensive, quote-unquote offensive, speed nova that wasn't a speed nova, hey, maybe you weren't aware, this is what a speed nova build is like, this is what it's useful for, and the guy got it. He didn't realize that he wasn't building nova the way we thought he was going to be building nova. He thought speed nova meant a nova with maximized range, maximized duration, and a little bit of power strength as well. So he didn't know what the speed nova was. So we explained it to him calmly, and then we played until about level wave 35. It was slower, but we all had fun in the end when we parted friends. So please, people, communicate when you're in a match with someone. Maybe they don't know something, maybe they forgot something. Talk to them. Of course, if you speak their language. If you don't speak their language, things get awkward. Sorry about all this ranting, but there are some things that don't have to do specifically with the game mechanics that I think and feel are important to share. Thirdly, and now we're going into the meat of things, Bastille. Vauban's for a long time signature ability, but has since been supplanted by Vortex. Enemies affected 12, power duration 15, power range 10. This is unboosted. With the maximized power duration, you will have a significantly longer duration of Bastille, and of course you will have maximized power efficiency. Don't be frightened by the fact that it only affects 12 enemies. You can spam out a lot of Bastilles to affect whatever number of enemies is desired, as well as whatever area is desired to be affected. If you have a lot of enemies that you want to affect in one single spot, switch to Vortex instead. Bastille is good against small numbers of enemies that are coming in from weird angles, or if you want to deny at less cost than Vortex a wide choke point or something like that. Also, it's good against enemies with unpredictable auras, unpredictable proximity auras. Yes, I'm getting not enough specific with something very specific. I mean toxic ancients and stuff. So if you don't want to accidentally drag a toxic ancient next to you and get infected by the toxic procs, then you should use Bastille. Example, in an emergency, if you're downed, if someone is resing you, or if you're helping someone res someone else, use a Bastille versus infested, for example. So there isn't any weird proximity stuff going on. Bastille is also interesting to use when you're panicking. So like I said, when you're being rezzed as a primary crowd control to your team, you got downed, you are getting rezzed, your vortexes are running out, you can just spam a few Bastilles about, and things will get much less chaotic, because enemies will just get lifted in their spots as they are. No weird stuff going on with improperly placed vortexes. And that's the primary reason why you should use Bastille if you cannot properly place your vortex. Lastly, we have Vortex. No maximum number of enemies affected. A reasonably unchangeable range of about 8.5 meters, I do believe. With the current build, it should be a little bit lower than that, but it's still a very good range. I experimented with overextend, but I wasn't aware of the fact that power range mods affect Vortex only with half strength. So it's not really not really efficient to use overextend if you plan on ever using Bastille. If you just want to be a Vortex only Vauban, you can try to use overextend ed on Vortex, but it won't do as well as you think it will. And if you want to take out narrow-minded to get better range on Vortex, I would heavily advise against it, because you're going to screw up your efficiency on getting more duration of crowd control out of less energy. Overall, though, Vortex is my favorite crowd control method for Vauban. You can really take control of tight corridors, of most defensive maps, because enemies will be funneled through certain approach paths. My favorite in Orc and Derelict defense these days is actually to use a triple Vortex strategy. One at the very top of, well, at the very nearest portion of every stairway connecting to the pod area. So you have the pod, you have one stairway, let's say, towards the left, a double stairway towards the left, a double stairway towards the right. You have some routes and another door towards the north and forward. You have some routes and some doors towards the south or behind you, let's say. I like to place a Vortex at the top of the left stairway, at the bottom of the right stairway, so the absolute edge of the pod area itself. And I like to put another Vortex on the benches of the bottom position, of the south position, as we are calling it now. So there are a lot of enemies that jump up onto the pod platform from the area with several doors. Comparatively, not as many enemies that jump up onto the platform from the area with one door. That actually works decently well even against infested MOAs, because I really don't know what to say about that. It just works. Also, on that subject, these days in Orc and Derelict defense, which is very pertinent towards Vauban, because that is the primary use of Vauban for a long while now. Loki disarm, radial disarm Loki works really well in Orokin Derelict Defense. So please consider taking either my hybrid build for Loki, which is, I would say, kind of better because Loki can be invisible and he won't be targeted by the MOAs that he's trying to disarm, or just take a maximized power range radial disarm Loki to take care of those pesky MOAs, and then you will have the same wonderful, super easy Orokin Derelict defensive experience that you've always had. Okay, so I think that actually about does it for my guide of Vauban. A little word about weapon synergy. Vauban, because he has Vortex, primarily to synergize with Vortex, you would want something with explosive damage or with high pierce. Now, Penta and Ogress are favorites. Angstrom is also passable, but only if you're doing an Orokin Derelict defense and you can aim from above your enemies, because the spread, if you are using Magnum Force like I do, and actually let me just show you, this is just a raw damage Angstrom build. So if you're using Magnum Force, the spread gets really out of hand. So I don't recommend relying on the Angstrom unless you are in an Orokin Derelict defense specifically. Otherwise, take an Ogress, excuse me, or a Penta. Those are really good. You can try a bow. I've seen people do it. I don't recommend it though. It just doesn't have the same I would say it just doesn't have the same ability to kill large amounts of enemies. Yes, they're all of your unfortunate Vortex victims are going to be forced roughly into the same little spot, but you're going to be having to use excuse me, you're going to have to use several vortices, and some of the enemies might not even line up with your bow shot anyway. So still very good to use explosive weapons even though you're relying heavily on Vortex. And with Bastille, only heavy explosive weapons synergize well. I do remember, and yes, this is kind of turning into a story corner, I do remember the first time excuse me, I do remember the first time I really did a very long duration defense. It was back when, way back when, Infested were still a prominent force on the star map itself. And I wasn't actually Vauban myself. I was playing with a Vauban, I was playing with a Rhino, and I was playing with some random Excalibur that the game had matched us with. And I myself was playing as Nova. So I didn't even have I had an Ogress, which I was very happy with back then. I didn't even have it fully formed. I don't even remember if there were Forma back then. Damn, that was a long time ago. My Nova wasn't fully leveled, but she definitely got fully leveled by the end of that match, I can tell you that. So we were doing a random defense. I met a couple of guys online in another match, and I said, hey, let's just do an endurance run on defense for funsies. And they said okay, and we decided to do a random infested defense mission. We got matched with the random Excalibur again, whose name I might like to publicly shame because he basically leeched the entire fucking time. He basically leeched the entire fucking time. I hate leechers. Now, the moral of the story is we got to wave 115 before our Vauban got dropped by an unfortunate disconnect, and we couldn't get him back. So that was really fun. And back then, Infested Ancients used to have the old heavy booted model, let's call it that. They had a really clunky model, and their weak points were their boots, basically. So with Bastille, you could lift Infested Ancients, and you could hit their boot weak spot by placing an Ogre's shot at the ground at their feet, and it was really awesome. These days, not so much, but yeah, because Bastille lifts enemies wherever it finds them, it's still better to have a weapon with area of effect rather than a piercing weapon, like I was saying, possibly for Vortex. So explosive weapons synergize better with Vauban, with Bastille and Vortex. If you want a lot more math for efficiency and stuff, you can check out my previous Vauban guide. It's still mostly accurate with the mentions that I said earlier. So between then and now, we had the ability changes, so ability mods no longer need to be slotted, and range affects Vortex. Otherwise, it's mostly accurate, whatever I did say then. So, thank you everyone for joining me for this casual guide of Vauban. I hope to be bringing you an interesting look at the new Warframe Mesa next week. So far it's kind of hit and miss. I kind of really like some things about her and really don't see any point of some other things. We'll see how that shapes up for next week. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for your continued interest in my Warframe guide series. I hope that you will consider sticking around for more episodes. This has been Rexar of the YouTube and sometimes Twitch channel NotQuiteThereGaming, signing off.